Thank you so much for joining us here at the U.S.A. Pavilion LaunchPad to learn about doing business in the #1 state for aerospace in the United States, and that is Washington State, conveniently located right across from the LaunchPad at booth A82 here in Hall 3. I am Emily Whitman. I am the Business Attraction Manager with Greater Seattle Partners. And Greater Seattle Partners is a leading public-private economic development corporation, and we're driving investment into the Greater Seattle region by doing what we're doing today, which is telling the story globally of our talented workforce, our innovative spirit, our diverse economy, and our incredible quality of life. Anyone from Washington will be sure to tell you about the hikes and mountains and quality of life that we have. And we're delighted to be here in partnership with the Aerospace Futures Alliance, led by Kelly Maloney, as well as our colleagues over at Pacific Northwest Aerospace Alliance, led by Brian Canfield, as well as colleagues from Washington State Department of Commerce, two of whom you'll hear from in just a minute. We're also so thankful to have Roei Ganzarski, our CEO of MagniX, based in Redmond, as well as Richard Aboulafia, who of course is a world-renowned aerospace analyst and voice within our community to talk about the study that the Teal Group just released very recently. And I would also like to recognize Washington State Senator Mark Elias. Thank you for your leadership. And before we really get off to these speakers, I want to make sure that you do two things. One, make sure that if you haven't already, please give your business card to a member of our team. We're passing a bowl around so we know who you are. And two, please go back and join us at the Washington State booth either now or at 4 o'clock for wine from Washington, and we can discuss what you're about to hear further. But without any further ado, I would like to introduce Lieutenant Governor Cyrus Habib. He is Washington's Chief Opportunity Officer. He serves as the President of the Senate. He's a member of the Council on International Relations. He's incredibly interested and is a leader in our community in international relations. He's also the youngest elected elected official in the U.S. Presiding officer in the U.S. I'll give you a couple other titles, too, besides Chief Opportunity Officer. Please join me in welcoming Lieutenant Governor Cyrus Habib.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Emily, and to Greater Seattle Partners. Thank you for putting on this event today. I'm going to get a chance to thank the Department of Commerce in just a moment, but I want to thank all the delegates who came here, who traveled 9.5 hours to be here with us. We, despite being one of the farthest places in the United States from Paris, nevertheless have the largest delegation in state history with over 80 members of our delegation to the 2019 Paris Air Show. It's so impressive, and I know Governor Inslee, were he here today, would say just how proud he is of the level of excitement and enthusiasm that we have for aerospace as demonstrated by this impressive delegation. We are here for 3 reasons. We're here this week, first of all, to support our member companies that are delegates in this trade mission and to help them to identify business opportunities, to grow and expand, to let the world know, including current and potential customers, about the quality of aerospace goods and services that we provide at every level of the supply chain in Washington State. So that's the first reason that we're here, is to support our companies on the trade mission. The second reason is to identify recruitment opportunities. And we've had a wonderful week of doing that as we've told the story of why this state, with the best, most educated aerospace labor force, with the cheapest and cleanest power, with the most competitive tax policy for aerospace, why Washington is the #1 state for aerospace. And you're going to hear more about that by someone who's more objective than I am in just a few minutes. So that's the second reason we're here. And the third reason we're here is in some ways maybe even more important, and that is to show our support and solidarity for the aerospace sector. You know, some of you may have heard me say this a couple days ago that, you know, I think when we're honest with ourselves here, all of the 100,000 plus people at this air show will recognize that there's something special about aerospace. There's something different about aerospace and aviation. It's not just like any other sector. Because every single time a plane heads into the sky, whether we're on board or you're watching it from the earth, our imagination is activated and engaged, and we have a sense of wonder in the capacity of humanity to do wonderful things, to overcome obstacles and barriers, and even physics itself, to reach for the stars. And that's why we feel so passionately. But in Washington State, it's not just the freight mobility, the tourism and connectivity for businesses, the ability to have relationships with people around the world and meet face-to-face with others. It's not all those things. It's also a way of life for us and key to our economy. It is central to who we are, and it represents business opportunities and jobs, family wage jobs in 39 out of 39 counties in Washington State. So I could not be more excited to be here on behalf of Governor Inslee and our state legislature to let the world know that Washington State continues to be the hub and center of the aerospace industry in our world. Now it's my tremendous pleasure to be able to introduce a friend and mentor of mine, the director of our Washington State Department of Commerce, who previously served as chancellor of Washington State University in Spokane, and before that was our state's Senate Majority Leader. She has a PhD in economics and has taught as a professor of economics in a number of different universities, and so we're so fortunate that she's leading this delegation, and even more so that she's leading our Department of Commerce. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Lisa Brown, Director of Commerce.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Habib, and I think you can see how lucky we are to have such a great ambassador for our state and for our aerospace industry. Basically, I'm here to introduce our next exciting guest. However, I want to let you know that we have not just an aerospace cluster, it's really a super cluster with over 136,000 workers in the aerospace industry, over 1,400 companies in the supply chain. And the past has been fantastic for us, but we see a future that's even brighter. And I think that's because we know that the key is investing in our human potential and our intellectual capital. And so our state legislature, who's represented here today, has made those investments from pre-K into our K-12 system, especially STEM, apprenticeships. Our skilled workforce is something we're very proud of, and it's growing every day, as well as the density of our engineering labor force and our 2 research universities and the national lab. Some of the most interesting things happening in aerospace today, as you all know, is in the intersections of aerospace with tech and with other sectors of the economy. And that's where Seattle and Washington State is really exciting. Of course, we not only have the legendary companies headquartered like Amazon and Microsoft, but we're growing in technology around those areas like AI and autonomous vehicles and space and clean energy that represent the future of this industry. Those intersections are represented today by our next speaker. So visit us at our conference in July when we host the International New Space Conference. Join us later today, meet some of our companies, enjoy Washington's wine. Our aerospace industry is in almost every one of our 39 counties, both in terms of companies and workforce. And the diversity of that industry is represented by our next speaker. I think we all know that the electrification of aircraft and the decarbonization of our economy is part of our future. It's something we share across the globe. And our next speaker, Roei Ganzarski of MagniX, is the CEO of a company that is taking us to that future, and he's going to share his story of why he's doing it in Washington State. Thank you.
So I was told I only have about 45 minutes to speak. So MagniX, as was mentioned, we're an electric propulsion company. We're providing electric motors for commercial aircraft at the 6 to 12 passenger size aircraft at this point, with ranges between 100 miles to 650 miles. The reason we're doing that is middle mile aviation is broken. If you have to travel up to 50 miles within a city, there are solutions. They may not be great or convenient, but you can walk, you can drive, you can take a scooter if you've done that here in Paris on the Lime scooters, subways, there are options. If you're going over 1,000 miles, there are phenomenal options. As a former Boeing employee, there are great aircraft out there, both by Boeing, Airbus, Bombardier, Embraer, that do long-range flights efficiently. The price of the ticket is not bad at all, and the time spent in the airport and to the airport for a 6, 9, 12-hour flight is worthwhile. But if you're anywhere between 50 to 1,000 miles, recent research has shown that people would rather drive up to 900 miles in range instead of the hassle of flying, let alone the high cost of flying. A 250-mile flight could cost you over $500 US for a return flight. Those are things that are unacceptable, and the result of that is that communities have been disconnected. People who don't live in the metropolitan area don't get to travel as much. Commerce doesn't get to expand as much because package deliveries are slow and expensive. So what we're doing at MagniX is increasing prosperity by connecting those communities with electric aviation. 375 horsepower motors, 750 horsepower motors. We're going to have our first flight this November in the Pacific Northwest of the United States with a seaplane with Harbor Air, which is the world's largest seaplane operator. We're going to have the Eviation Alice aircraft, which if you haven't seen out in their chalet, you should go see it. It's the world's first commuter all-electric aircraft, 9 passengers, 650 miles. They'll be using our motors as well. When we had to choose a place for our headquarters, because the company originated in Australia, which is a phenomenal country in itself, but when we had to choose where in the world do we want our global headquarters to be, it was a pretty obvious choice to choose Washington State. As a company, we're trying to create the next generation of aerospace company. We don't want to be another Boeing or another GE or another Pratt & Whitney. That's been done, it exists, and they do a great job in what they're doing. But we're trying to revolutionize an industry that hasn't been revolutionized since 1939. And when you want to do that, you can't do it the same way. So we also need to infuse into an aerospace company that element of the startup, the not just thinking outside the box, but not seeing a box at all. Washington State has a beautiful culmination of the old school, tried and proven aerospace coming not only from Boeing, but the entire ecosystem that you heard about that Boeing has created. The suppliers, the second-tier suppliers, the third-tier suppliers, phenomenal universities with great aerospace education. That's one side of the equation. The other thing that attracted us to Washington was the fact that that's where the birthplace of Microsoft, Amazon, Starbucks, Costco, PACCAR, multiple, not just tech startups and companies, but multiple successful companies that each in its own way challenge the status quo. At MagniX, we're taking aerospace and creativity and challenging the status quo in aviation, which is why we love being in this state. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Richard Aboulafia for some really interesting data.
Well, thank you, Roei. Thanks, Lieutenant Governor. Thanks to you all for bringing this group together. It's really an honor because, well, we've just done the second year of the Aerospace Competitive Study for Washington State, but what intrigues me the most, as any forecaster would be intrigued by, is having two different studies to compare. You've now got two different sets of data, and quite a lot of data, to look at and try to identify trends. That's the good news. I've got some interesting trends and observations. The bad news is, boy, am I accustomed to speaking to PowerPoint, and I don't seem to have any PowerPoint here, so I'll try to speak just off the cuff on the subject. First of all, this was, for the second year running, an effort to create a truly open architecture study that anyone can replicate. If you look at the study, and it's available, or it will be made available in its second incarnation for download, all of the source material, all of the source links will be presented. And that means, of course, that you can check our work. But the result for both years is that Washington State was #1 in terms of competitiveness, a very, very, very strong #1. And with $42 billion in exports, that means not only is it a huge producer, but it's a huge global player, bigger than most countries in terms of its total aerospace throw weight, global trade, and industry presence. Just fantastic numbers. I was thrilled to see that again. But like I said, my colleagues, and I should mention, we've got some great ones, both at Teal Group and Olympic Analytics back in Washington State. we've had the chance to compare numbers. A couple of observations really become clear. One is that support from local and state governments is enormously important. Just having that level of infrastructure support, tax policies, and of course educational policies is enormously important in making a place competitive. So again, kudos to the Lieutenant Governor for being here and representing the state, because that kind of support is enormously important. The other thing is that, frankly, geography isn't destiny. It's nothing unique about the position of Washington State in the corner of the Northwest, beautiful part of the world. There are some good things about it that are geography-based, like relatively low electricity costs, but there's quite a lot that's frankly just the results of things like education, enormously important. We've watched a couple of states rise in this year's survey relative to the previous year's survey. We've watched a couple slip. And very often, that is due to education. It is enormously important. Something like 3% of the Washington State workforce has an engineering degree. That kind of number really speaks to the level of skills and education that go into making an aerospace industry hugely competitive. Now, when we look at, directions and trends, everything indicates things are solid. Can't take everything for granted, but in general, it looks like not only is Washington State extremely well prepared for the current state of the industry, but also for the technology and innovation that'll be necessary for the next generation, whatever industry 2.0, 3.0, 6.0 happens. Does that organization look like Roei's? Does it look like something else? I can't tell you. All I know is that nothing stays the same, and you can't rely on simply building large numbers of tubes and wings forever. Something eventually gets innovated, something gets transformed, something loud goes overhead. The important thing is to be in a position where you are competitive on the basis of technology and education. And on that note, I'll turn over back to Emily.
Thanks, Richard. So, Richard, you're not quite off the hot seat yet. That's not meant to be ominous whatsoever. But you mentioned a couple of things. We talked about education. You've talked about transportation infrastructure in particular and the importance of states investing and making those investments. I know in particular, Washington has done quite well in education. We're not as high as we would like to be in transportation, but we have made a $70 billion investment in our infrastructure between now and 2040. So do you have a sense that our ranking might rise?
Thanks, Emily. Absolutely. I mean, your future is what you make it. That's the one thing that really hits you when you do a study twice in a row and you watch this data move on the basis of investment, or fall in some cases. If you inadequately fund infrastructure or education or any of these things, yes, your competitive position can drop, and we've seen a couple of notable ones. But that kind of commitment to a future of aerospace, which it's absolutely the key to rising in the rankings. And I look forward to the privilege, whether this venue or other venues, to looking at the trend lines in the future. And I'm pretty confident that looking at Washington State's commitment to the future, especially in terms of education and training and infrastructure, you're on the right track.
Thanks, Richard. Oh, don't hand that mic back yet. Something else that we're very proud of that we asked you to take a particular look at the first time around and that you did again was worker productivity. Because it doesn't matter how much you put into it if the product that you get at the end of the day isn't quality, high quality, and efficiently made. And we're pretty proud of the workforce that we have, all 125,000 of them statewide. Can you just talk about your sense on productivity and how you incorporated that and how it was unique within this study?
Yeah, absolutely. We looked at all of the metrics, not just in terms of the raw costs.
We're competing with a jet.
Yeah, not just any jet, it's a Rafale, the local team. It's more than just the raw costs of labor. At the end of the day, it comes down to look at the factors of productivity that go into unit labor costs. And here, Washington State was really a stellar performer in output per employee. And in terms of the multiplier, you know, what the state generated by way of revenue per employee, I believe it was 11, I believe it was something like, forget the number, but 11, 11, I mean, it was a remarkable multiplier. And I was very impressed by the trend in all of the metrics involved in this. You know, it's one thing to say you're low cost, but if your output measured by dollars per employee doesn't quite measure up to that, it doesn't really mean very much in this business. This is a game that involves high skill, high wage jobs, and therefore labor costs on their own really don't mean very much. And that's another thing that keeps barriers to entry so high in this business, both at the prime contractor level, at the supplier level, and even at the geographic level, on a country basis, on a state basis. This is an industry with high barriers to entry that are predicated upon those levels of labor productivity and efficiency.
Well, you're taking this quiz so well. It's like you wrote the report. Something else that we're quite proud of is that we were number 2 last year in the cost category, and we are number 1 this year in the cost category. Hoping you can dive deeper and give us a reminder of why we moved up.
Yes, a variety of factors just related to output per employee at the end of the day. You know, it's not just that's 99% of it, right? You've got rising levels of output coupled with a workforce that is extremely efficient and skilled at what it does, and also efficient and intelligent use of automation to help enable that rise. You know, we all know the industry is getting more automated, but of course, paradoxically, it takes a skilled workforce, a well-trained workforce with a high level of STEM education to be able to make use of that automation. So, you know, it's a bit paradoxical, but it's true. There's nothing game-changing about automation. In reality, it takes incumbent players and makes them stronger if they do it right.
Thank you. I'm wondering if any of our other panelists would like to add anything that Richard has touched on. I'm sure Richard could talk ages and ages and ages about this report, but I just want to give an opportunity for anyone else.
Okay. Well, I just want to say, I neglected to say this earlier, but is there this? Mike. Okay. I just want to say that, you know, to those who may be visiting us here at the LaunchPad here, and this is your first time, or perhaps you have a relationship with Washington State, but you haven't had a chance to have a one-on-one meeting with us while we're here, I do want to extend a very warm invitation to all of you that if you want to learn more about what we offer in Washington State, our ability to create custom-tailored apprenticeship programs to develop your workforce and to meet your needs. If you'd like to discuss with us potential site locations, if you'd like to discuss with us possible partnerships with our incumbent businesses in Washington State, please come and speak to one of our folks immediately following this presentation. If I can join, I'll be happy to join and meet with you, but for sure we'll have folks from Commerce who'd be happy to speak with you. And please help us to tell this story, because even though we're number 1, it doesn't mean that, you know, and I think what Richard says is important, which is that these things can change very rapidly. And so that's why I'm here in person. It's why Governor Inslee has come so many times. It's why Dr. Brown is here in person. It's why we've got legislators and city officials, because we don't ever want to slip to number 2. So let us know. And again, we're very excited to meet with anyone who's interested in learning more. Thank you so much. And again, thank you to Emily. Thank you to Greater Seattle Partners. It's wonderful for us in state government to have an entity in the nonprofit sector who works with us in collaboration. It's a wonderful public-private relationship that we have in Washington State that allows us to do trade promotion, foreign direct investment, promotion in Washington. We need both public and private partners working together. So thank you again.
I just want to add that we love the anchor of our very large companies, but a lot of the excitement really is in the startup and innovation space, and that is happening all over the state, from Bellingham to Moses Lake to Spokane. And also want to give a plug for the intersection of this sector with other key sectors, because I think that's where some of the really interesting things are happening. So space in particular, as I said, we've got companies like Vulcan and Blue Origin and SpaceX, but a lot of startups as well. And in the clean energy sector, everything from biofuels to battery storage is being researched. And that's where some of the exciting technologies are being developed right now. So again, please join us in July at the New Space Conference. Please join us at our booth later today.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And as we said, please come back and join us at 4 o'clock for Washington Wine. Otherwise, have a great rest of your show.